up in the dark to the sound of rain. Not the gentle kind that farmers dream about, not the soft patter that says the crops will be happy. No, this is the heavy, endless kind of rain that turns roads into rivers and fields into graves for seeds. You are not you. Not in this story. Tonight, you are Martin, a peasant farmer in a small village somewhere in northern Europe in the year 1315. Your entire world is a strip of muddy land, a thatched roof that leaks on cold nights, a wife named Anna, 2 children with hollow cheeks, and a field that, if everything goes right, keeps all of you alive. You do not know words like economy, climate change, or systemic risk. You just know this: if the field fails, you fail. You remember the last good harvest. The sky was kind. The grain ripened tall and heavy, bending under its own weight. The village smelled of bread and smoke and sweat, but it was a warm kind of struggle. You paid your lord his share, you gave the church its tithe, and there was still enough left to eat until the next year. You even had a few moments of something that almost felt like peace. Anna laughed more. The children argued over who got the crust with more honey on it. You thought, just for a second, maybe next year will be like this too. You had no idea that the ground under your feet was already cracking. For decades, Europe's population has been climbing. Forests cut, swamps drained, fields pushed higher up the slopes and deeper into the valleys. The good land is gone. People like you farm the almost land. Almost dry enough, almost warm enough, almost safe. In a good year, it works. In a bad year, you are about to find out what a bad year really looks like. Spring arrives late. Snow lingers longer than it should, clinging to the shadows of hedges and ditches. You wait for the soil to soften so you can push seeds into it. When it finally does, you work until your back screams. You plant and you pray. And then the rain begins. At first, you're grateful. Rain is life. Rain is the difference between bread and empty bowls. But it doesn't stop. Day after day, the sky opens and dumps cold water onto a world that has no way to dry. Your boots sink ankle deep into the fields. The seeds drown. The tiny shoots that dare appear are slapped flat by the constant downpour. The path to town becomes a brown river. Carts tip over in the muck. The mill wheel turns too fast, then not at all, choked by the swollen stream. You look up at the clouds as if they are a person you could reason with. Enough, you whisper. The sky does not answer. It just keeps pouring. At first, the hunger is subtle. You and Anna begin by making the bread a little thinner. You mix more husk into the flour, more weeds, a little less grain. The children complain. They are old enough to notice when their bowl is lighter. We'll make up for it after harvest, you tell them, just for now. You are lying, but only a little. You still believe yourself. In the village, there is talk of prices. Sometimes the reeve from the manor rides in with news from market towns. The price of grain has gone up. People mutter and shrug. They have seen prices rise before. Bad years happen. But then it rises again. And again. You start to hear numbers that make your stomach clench. Twice the usual price. 3 times. One day, you walk to the nearest town to see if there is grain to buy. The path is lined with people who look like they have been partially erased. Cheeks hollowed, eyes too large, shoulders narrower than any healthy person's should be. The market square, once loud with argument and laughter, has become strangely quiet. The stalls are still there, but many are empty. Where grain is being sold, it sits in small, precious piles, guarded like treasure. You approach one stall, ask the price. The number you hear is impossible. It is not a price for someone like you. It is a price for a duke, a bishop, a merchant fat from years of trade. You look at the tiny heap of grain and think, that is more than the value of our cow. That is more than the value of my life. And yet, you are ready to offer both. But the man behind the stall has already seen the panic in your eyes. He shakes his head even before you speak. Unless you have silver, he says. Don't waste my time. You have a few copper coins, a knife, a belt. You offer them anyway. He looks bored. I can get 10 times that from the city, he says. Move. You move. On the way out of town, you see a woman sitting against a wall, her child lying across her lap. The child's chest rises and falls in quick, shallow breaths. The woman stares at nothing. You do not stop, because if you stop, you will have to look, and if you look, you might not be able to keep walking. Hunger has started to teach you a new kind of selfishness. Back in the village, the choices grow cruel. You had one workhorse. You have none now. You had a few chickens. Only one remains, and Anna guards it like a dragon guards gold. You don't kill an egg, she says. Not unless you have to. More families begin showing up at your door with the same question. Do you have anything to spare? You used to be the kind of man who would share his last crust. You are not sure you can afford to be that man anymore. One night, the 4 of you sit at the rough table. The bowl in the middle is shallow. Inside is a thin greenish stew of boiled leaves and roots you would never have eaten in better years. You watch your son scrape the last smear from the bottom of his bowl with his finger. He looks at you. He doesn't say anything, but you can hear the question. Is there more? There is not. But you fill his bowl with water so he can at least pretend. Later, when the children sleep, you open the chest where you keep the seed grain for next year. You and Anna sit in the dim light, staring at it. If we don't eat it, Anna says slowly, the children might not see spring. If we do eat it, you answer, none of us may see the year after. You do not reach into the chest that night. The next night, you do. The sound of the seeds falling into the pot is the sound of a future being sold off, one handful at a time. By the 3rd year, the famine is no longer an emergency. It is normal. You are thinner than you remember ever being. Your belt has more holes in it now. Your hands shake sometimes when you work. The villagers mutter more. They mutter about God, about sin, about the Lord and his manor who seems to have enough bread for his table even when theirs are empty. They mutter about the merchants who hoard grain and wait for the price to climb higher. Sometimes they do more than mutter. One night, you are half asleep when you hear shouting from the direction of the manor barn. You step out into the cold air and see shadows moving. A group of men from the village have broken the lock. They are hauling out sacks, passing them along a chain of hands like firefighters saving children from a burning house. Except the house this time is the entire system. Someone hisses, "Come on, Martin, help us!" For a moment, you freeze. You know what this is. Theft. Treason in some eyes. But you also know that inside those sacks is the difference between life and death for people you know, for people you love. Your stomach growls louder than your conscience. You join the chain. No one speaks of that night the next morning. The broken lock and the missing grain are talked about as if wolves took it, or spirits, or God. Everyone knows the truth. No one says it, because saying it aloud would mean admitting what kind of people hunger has turned you into. On Sundays, you still go to church. The priest looks thinner too, but his voice has lost none of its force. He talks about punishment, about a sinful world that has turned away from God. He says the famine is a reminder of who is truly in control. Some people nod with tears in their eyes. Others stare at the floor. You used to feel comforted by these words. Now you feel something else. If this is punishment, you wonder, for what? For working the land? For trying to feed your children? For being born poor instead of rich? You see people start to whisper about each other, about the woman who never goes to mass, about the family that eats meat more often than seems possible, about the strange man who arrived from another village just before the worst rains began. The human brain does not like chaos. When something terrible happens for no obvious reason, it starts drawing lines between random dots. Maybe it was them. Maybe it was him. Maybe it was her. You feel it in yourself too, that itchy desire to blame someone. The weather is too big. God is too distant. But the man who raised the grain prices, the lord who refused to open his barns, the neighbor who still looks a little too well fed, they are close. How many of Europe's future riots, future revolts, future burnings, and massacres are already forming here as small, quiet resentments in hungry hearts? Eventually, as all storms do, the worst of the famine passes. Not because anyone found a brilliant solution, not because kings suddenly became generous or merchants became kind, simply because the weather shifted, the rains eased, the summers grew a little warmer, the soil remembered how to feed. You remember the first harvest that felt almost normal again? The grain was not plentiful, but it was there. You held a handful of it to the light and felt something like relief and something like rage, because you know what this handful could have meant 2 years ago. Your children survive. Not all the children in your village do. There are gaps at the table in more than one home. You will see those mothers in church every Sunday, their hands clenched just a little tighter around their rosaries. You will not talk about it, but it will hang in the air like the damp. Your son never quite grows as tall as you expected. Your daughter's bones heal a little crooked from a year when she did not have enough to build them properly. They are the generation of the Great Famine, scarred in ways that are hard to see, but impossible to erase. When the Black Death arrives in Europe a few decades later, carried by fleas and rats and ships and trade, it will find men and women whose bodies were built in those hungry years. It is not the only reason the plague kills so many, but it is one of the quiet ones. Famines rarely make the headlines of history textbooks. Wars are louder, plagues are more dramatic, but hunger weakens the foundations long before anything collapses. Centuries later, people will walk across these same lands and see nothing but peaceful countryside. They will drive on roads where you trudged through mud. They will eat bread so cheap they do not even finish it. They will live in a world of overflowing warehouses, supermarkets, refrigerated ships, plastic-wrapped abundance. Some of them will learn about the Great Famine in school and forget it after the exam. Medieval people, they will think. Different times, different problems. But they will not be as different as they imagine. They too will have stretched their food systems as far as they can go. Fields pushed to the limit, oceans trawled, rivers dammed, forests burned for pasture and crops. They too will depend on weather patterns they barely understand, on invisible agreements between ocean currents and jet streams, between heat and cold, between rain and soil. And when those patterns shift because of sun cycles, volcanoes, or the gases those future people pour into the air, they will discover what you already know, that no matter how clever your machines, how complex your markets, how tall your towers, you still live at the mercy of the land and the sky. You, Martin, will never know any of this. Your world ends inside a few miles of muddy track and one small church with a leaky roof. But your story does not end with you. It flows forward in your children, in the records of monks who wrote of hunger and great distress, in the bones buried beneath fields that humans will plant again and again. And if we, sitting centuries later behind glowing screens, are wise, we will remember you, not as a nameless peasant in a forgotten famine, but as a warning, and as a mirror. If this story of rain without mercy, fields without harvest, and tables without bread made you feel how thin the line is between enough and nothing, then let it stay with you after the stream ends. Because here, on Epochlight, we don't just tell stories about kings, castles, and shining victories, we also tell the stories of empty barns, muddy roads, and the millions of quiet lives that history tried to bury under a single sentence. There was a great famine. They were more than that. And now, so are we.